General Mark Milley's first month as the Army's new Chief of Staff has been a bit of a whirlwind. Last week he was in the Middle East, and tomorrow he will head to Indonesia for the Pacific Army's Chiefs Conference. But I would say actually he made the time to come here and be with us, and I think that's a testament to the importance he places on the Army National Guard's role in the total Army. He said it best in his Senate confirmation hearing, and I'll quote, "I think there's one Army. That's it." He said, "We wear the same uniform, and it says United States Army on our chest." Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the much anticipated, the new Chief of Staff of our Army, General Mark Milley.
You know, with the Sergeant of Arms and everything, I thought I was in Congress, so check it out. Look at that. All right, attention orders. Hey, first I want to thank Deb. Thanks for that introductory remark, and thank all of you for being here. And I did note that Frank Grass was here, and Glenn Curtis, and Tim Cadavy, and so I asked Tim outside, I said, "What are we doing?" And he said, "I don't know, I'm not in charge." And then I asked Frank Grass, I said, "What are we doing?" He said, "I don't know, I'm not in charge." I looked at Curtis and I said, "Look, you're the NGAUS guy." I said, "What are we doing?" He says, "I don't know, I'm not in charge." So I got three guys here, all from my guard, who said, "Not in charge." Well, let me tell you, I think you're all in charge. And I think the world of the National Guard. As I looked out there, I shook Corey Carr's hand not just a few minutes ago. As I walked in, and Corey and I served together a long time ago in Bosnia, when he was Lieutenant Colonel Carr and I was Colonel Milley. And since that time, I have served repeatedly over and over again, not only in the Balkans, but in Afghanistan, Iraq, and many other places, actually, with our great National Guard. And I have to tell you that in my mind, what Deb said is absolutely 100% true. There's only one Army. And this association, since 1878, is what Glenn Curtis told me, has been the association that has not only fought for the needs of America's National Guard, but it's also fought for the needs of America's Army. And I want to thank Gus Haggard, who's here tonight, and the entire organization of NGAUS for all the efforts you've done for well over a century on behalf of our entire Army. And I also want to thank Jody Ernst, Senator Jody Ernst, who just spoke to you. I had the pleasure of talking to her several times during my preparation for testimony to become the chief. And then since then, she's not only a wonderful senator and a great national leader, but she's also, as you well know, a tremendous leader in the National Guard who served also in combat. So how about another round of applause for Senator Ernst? And I believe that we have in the audience Representatives Mark Take from Hawaii and Jim Bradenstein and Trent Kelly are also here. So thank you, not only for being great representatives, but being here and supporting our nation's National Guard and for all that you do for our Army back in D.C. So thank you. And thanks also to the veterans, the wounded warriors, and the families that are attending today and this entire conference. And it's especially important, I think, today, because today is our nation's Patriots' Day, and it marks the 14th anniversary of 9/11, which I had the privilege of attending the ceremony at the Pentagon this morning. All of us should reflect on that and the meaning, and I know you have. Almost all of you have served in combat since that time. You all remember the reasons why we fight, and we should never forget the lives we lost on that horrible day and the freedom that we preserve by taking the fight to the enemy. The history of our Guard has been around since 1636. I don't have to tell you that. You know it. And you were chartered to protect and defend our great nation, even before we were a nation. And it does my heart good to sit here in the great state of Tennessee to know that the United States National Guard was regimented as infantry and artillery with the purpose of defending the great colony of Massachusetts. That's right. And I was given just a few minutes ago the shoulder patch of the 3rd Battalion, 126th Aviation out of the Red Sox Nation. That's kind of weak from Massachusetts. You know, look at it. Dude, I'm from Boston. Come on, pick the pace up. Let's hear a little bit more. Can we get a little bit more out of Massachusetts? All right, everybody go silent. Here we go, watch this. Okay, Red Sox Nation, on 3, let's hear it. 1, 2, 3. There you go. Thank you, thank you. And without the National Guard, by the way, there probably wouldn't be a Red Sox. Maybe we would have had a better season this year, but wouldn't be a Red Sox. There wouldn't be a Patriots either, and for all those Pittsburgh fans, by the way, we did in fact win last night fair and square. And I personally checked the balls, and they were inflated. And the commo problems that the Steelers allegedly had were in fact an act of nature, so I don't want to hear it. Just look at the scoreboard, don't want to hear it. Also, on a more serious note, though, about the history of the Guard, as the 39th Chief of Staff of the Army, I did a fair amount of research and reading of past chiefs. And I read quite a bit, as you might imagine, of Creighton Abrams, one of our greatest chiefs of staff that we've ever had. And I was reminded, and am still reminded, of his charter in that great difficult war, Vietnam, which we did not prevail, as communist tanks rolled through the gates of the U.S. Embassy in April of 1975 to signify that we had, in fact, lost that war. And Creighton Abrams and other senior officers of our Army at the end of that war did a very detailed and deep, reflective after-action review. And there were many reasons why we did not prevail. But one of those reasons, in the words or the thoughts of Creighton Abrams, was we lost the will, we lost the connective tissue with the American people. And you may know that that war was largely fought by a professional force of volunteers and draftees, and very few National Guard served. There were some. Indiana served and some others, but very few. It was largely fought by volunteers and draftees. And Creighton Abrams said that ultimately war is about politics and it's about the will of the people. And he said, never again will I send or be part of sending America's Army into conflict without Main Street USA. And he said, I'm just the Chief of Staff of the Army. I can't solve everything, but I can do some things. And one thing I'll do is I'll change the construct of how America's Army goes to war. And that's when we began the concept of a total army, of one army. One army made up of 3 components: the active or regular army, the National Guard, and the United States Army Reserve. And he designed us in such a way that we cannot conduct sustained land operations without the Guard and the Reserve. It is impossible for the United States of America to go to war today without bringing Main Street, without bringing Tennessee and Massachusetts and Colorado and California. You just can't do it. And he was right when he made that call, and he was right then, and he's right today. We are, in fact, one army. We have 3 components, but it's one army. We are e pluribus unum, in reality. Of the many come one. And we are not 10 divisions. We are 18 divisions. And we're not 32 brigades, we're 60 brigades, and we're not 490,000 soldiers, we are 980,000 American soldiers. And as we are one nation indivisible, we are in fact one army indivisible. And I want to reinforce that 100 times over and let no mistake about it. I mean what I say, and I say it in every meeting, and every time I hear the word 450, I jump through the ceiling. If I hear the word 490, I jump through the ceiling. If I hear the word 10 divisions, I lose my mind. It is one army, and we're not small, we're big, and we're very capable, and we're capable because of the reserves, we're capable because of the National Guard. Today, as I mentioned, is Patriots' Day, and in Massachusetts, where I grew up, we celebrate Patriots' Day in April, and we run the Boston Marathon, or some run the Boston Marathon, and begin spring break for children, and we commemorate the great battle, which didn't last long, of Lexington and Concord, and the opening events of the Revolutionary War. And those shots, those were fired not by the regular army. Those shots were fired by America's militia. Those shots were fired by America's National Guard. And a National Patriots Day, like that in Massachusetts that we celebrate today on 9/11 to honor the fallen, we also honor those who volunteer and defend this great nation and bring communities together. And all of us should be thankful for what we have. And I could ask anyone in America where you were on 9/11 in 2001 when our country came under attack, and most could tell us. But I can tell them that America's Army National Guard was everywhere. Not just in one place for one memory. You were everywhere. My home state's National Guard, the Air Guard, had fighters in the air within minutes of the first attack, heading rapidly to the World Trade Center towers. The 119th Fighter Wing from North Dakota scrambled to intercept the planes heading towards the Capitol. And among the 184 killed at the Pentagon were several active Guard and United States Army Reserve soldiers. In the days after the attack, it was the Army National Guard who responded to New York and New Jersey and Connecticut and Virginia, Maryland and Washington, D.C. It was Guardsmen who were searching airports, securing our people, the bridges, the seaports, and patrolling our northern and southern borders. Then we, all of us, the United States Army, one army, took the fight to the enemy in the mountains of Afghanistan and the deserts of Iraq. And you grew from 351,000 to 362,000 at the peak. And you participated in every single significant engagement there was. And I personally was witness to your competence and professionalism. In Afghanistan, I had many Guard units under my command, as well as in Iraq. And today, you continue to fight. Today, we have thousands of National Guardsmen deployed throughout the world on many critical missions, including, still today, Afghanistan. And many more are deployed in every combatant commander's area of responsibility. In Egypt, Iraq, Kosovo, Kuwait, across Africa and in Europe, as well as many places in the United States. Just the other day, as Deb mentioned, I happened to return from a trip, and I was in Iraq and then bounced over to Jordan and Israel and went over to Afghanistan and up to Europe. And during that trip, I met a few quiet professionals from Alpha Troop, 1st of the 112th Cav out of Texas. They were serving in the MFO. I heard they were wounded. I was in Iraq, so I said, or in Israel, we need to get to Israel, and I bounced over there and talked to each of them, and they'd make you proud. And I had the honor of presenting them with their Purple Hearts. And 4 of those Guardsmen, Staff Sergeant Chapa and Sergeant Cantu and Specialist Burkett and Private Romo, although they were injured, they were proud. They were proud to be Texans, they were proud to be Guardsmen, and most of all, they were proud to be Americans. Each of them is doing well, and each will recover. And interestingly, Sergeant Cantu received his second Purple Heart. And then Sergeant Chapa has a daughter, PFC Chapa, who also serves in the Texas Guard. These are America's citizen soldiers, and their commitment to mission, their commitment to nation, their commitment to the Army is unbelievable, and it's a family affair. Since 1991, America's National Guard has been deterring aggression, building partner capacity through the state partnership program that we do throughout not only the world, but particularly important in Europe. This low-cost, high-yield program operates globally in 74 countries, synchronized with all of our goals and our objectives, not only of the Department of Defense, but also the State Department, the Guard Bureau, and it's driven by you, the State Adjutant Generals. It directly supports our combatant commands and their security and cooperation planning. And just this year, in Kenya, Djibouti, and many others were added to the partnership program as we recognize the great importance of Africa to combat terrorism. And you're also contributing at home. You're partnering with our Homeland Defense agencies right now with over 2,000 soldiers and airmen from our National Guard that are fighting wildfires in Washington, Oregon, California, Idaho, and Montana. Your ability to respond to these situations, both abroad and at home, is key to our overall national defense. And you have done that, all of you, with great personal courage and great personal sacrifice. And in every case, you have responded, you have been timely, and you have acted decisively. And sometimes you didn't even have warning, as was the case in Haiti. And yet you rode to the sound of the guns, and you did so with great distinction. And in some other cases, you were actually on leave, as is the case of Alex Galartos from the Oregon National Guard. And you've all heard the story now of his heroism on the train in Paris, France, and I had an opportunity to call him within hours of the incident. And he was remarkable. He was humble. And he was a true professional. Who hears gunshots and runs towards it? Galartos did. Who motivates others to follow him into a small battle where he could die? Galartos did. Who willingly puts his life in danger to protect others? Galartos did. And he did it because he was a member of the United States Army. He did it because he was a member of the Oregon National Guard. He did it because he's an American. And like Galartos, like the Guard that has showed up at Lexington and Concord, you are ready, and our Army is ready. We are ready to win in ground combat. There's no second place on a battlefield. We are not the Army of the past. We are better than that. But we must ensure that we remain better. We must ensure that we remain number one. We cannot do it by just saying it. We must remain number one and face the challenges of not only today, but also tomorrow. And that is why my number one priority as Chief of Staff of the Army is readiness. And it's readiness across the total force. It's readiness for the entire Army. And there is no other number one. No American soldier on our watch, on your watch and my watch, must ever be committed to combat undermanned, untrained, poorly led, or poorly equipped. That is the most grievous sin we can commit. We, the leaders of this Army, do not want a fair fight. We want all the odds, all the time, always in our favor. And it's the obligation of our leaders to prepare our soldiers for combat, to ensure that our nation's sons and daughters have the necessary training and resources to win. And we must be ready today, and we must prepare for tomorrow. And we will do this by redefining and refining our training programs. We will have exceptionally tough, realistic training based on warfighting fundamentals. And we will build that over time, and we will achieve exceptional levels of readiness. And we have to be very good stewards of our limited resources. We're not going to get tons of them, but those that we do get, we've got to apply them right, and we've got to apply them to the task of readiness. For our soldiers to be properly trained, they have to be well led. So we're going to enhance our leader development and education at all levels across the entire Army. And what do we want? We want leaders that are tough, resilient, that can think and outfight and outsmart the enemy. We want them to be adaptive and agile and flexible. And we want them not only competent, but we want leaders of character. And we also must have sufficient capacity. Much of America's Army's capacity is resident in the National Guard. I expect demand to increase, not decrease, in the future. And we must rely more heavily on our National Guard to meet that demand. We must also be mindful that readiness takes time. Time to train, multiple iterations of exercises, and constant repetition at individual and collective level. Our forces are in demand in an ever-increasing complex global environment. And it's not limited to responding merely to conflict or war, but a demand for forces to support allies and partners across a range of missions that will require common and unique capabilities. Across a broad spectrum of missions that will require common capabilities across the entire Army. We will also continue to operate, as you all know and already have, as a joint force. And we will be providing the Joint Force commanders with Army capabilities to win decisively on land, because that is where wars are ultimately won. To meet that demand, we in the Army leadership have decided to propose to Congress to request additional funding for 12304. I've only been on the job for a couple of weeks, but it's readily obvious to me that I need to employ more of the Guard, not less. And as for the future, the challenge in the next few years is going to be to maintain our tactical and operational overmatch against our adversaries. As you all know, we have that today, we have that advantage. But access to information, access to technology, access to training, techniques, etc., are available to a wide array of organizations, both state and non-state actors. And this diffusion is rapidly decreasing our advantages on the battlefield, whether it's in the physical world or the virtual world of cyber. And what that translates in is risk, higher risk to our soldiers, our formations, and ultimately our missions. Our adversaries, our enemies, know how we operate. They know how we fight. And they have adapted their techniques to something that is now called hybrid warfare. This blend of conventional and irregular warfare does not attack the United States head-on. It threatens neighbors and is intent on creating instability in regions across the globe. And our success in the future will not be measured simply by tactical success. It will be measured by how we have adapted how we have adapted our knowledge, our tactics, our techniques, our procedures to the enemies that we fight, no matter where they are. Some things I want you to think about, things I want you to challenge. In my mind, nothing's sacred. Nothing about the Army or the way we do business is sacred. We must, all of us, collectively, challenge how we fight. We must, all of us, collectively challenge how we organize, how we train, how we equip. We must not allow ourselves to accept the status quo. The enemy is not. The enemy is not static, and we must adapt. And since 1915, America's National Guard has trained annually for 39 days. I want to challenge that. I'm not sure that's right. It might be 60. It might be 90. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. But I don't know if 39 is right. So I've asked Tim Cadavy, I've asked Glenn Curtis, I've asked Frank Grass to look at it. Let's now analyze it. Let's take a look. Is 39 the right time? Maybe it's 60 days for some units, 100 days for other units, 39 for others. I don't know. But let's not just say that a rule that's been in place since 1915, 100 years, is good enough for the next 100 years. It may not be. Somehow, over the last few decades, we've gotten away from roundout units. Roundout units were used quite a bit back when we were lieutenants and captains. I want to look at it. I want to take a hard look at it. And I want to see if we can, once again, maximize the effectiveness of roundout units so that we can leverage the capabilities and the capacities of both the regular Army and the Guard. And I want to look at roundout going both ways, not just Guard units rounding out active units. Not just Guard units rounding out active units, but I want to take a look at active units rounding out Guard units. So what would be so bad about a brigade of the 101st or the 82nd slapping on the bloody bucket patch of the 28th Division? Well, maybe not Pennsylvania, maybe Texas. But seriously, I want to look at it. I don't know that we'll do it, but I want to look at it. I want to take a hard look at it, because if we're going to be one Army, we got to be one Army. And I also want to look at it at the individual level. I want to take a page of best practices out of the Marine Corps. So the Marines, my father fought in World War II and hit the beach in the Central Pacific with the 4th Marine Division. And the 4th Marine Division today is the Marine Corps' Reserve Division. But they assign a lot of active duty Marines to the 4th Marine Division. Maybe that's something we should look at. And maybe there's something we should do in reverse as well, and assign a lot of Guardsmen to our current regular Army active duty divisions. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, I don't know, but I want to look at it. I want to challenge everything. I want to overturn every stone to find the right answer to maximize the capability and the capacity of America's Army. And I also am looking at the training centers. So if I ask myself, if training's so important, Milley, if readiness is so important, why is it the Guard only gets 2 rotations a year? One at JRTC. If over 50% of the United States Army is in the Guard, which it is, if all this combat power is in the Guard, then how can I look myself in the mirror and say that the Guard's ready to go if I've only got 2 brigades going through a CTC? So that's not right. So I want to look at it. I'd make no promises. It's a lot of money. There's a lot of, there's 50 million little staff actions that have to go along with what I just said, but I am the Chief of Staff of the Army, so I ought to be able to make it happen. So one of the things, I told Glenn, and you guys can't call him that, but I can. Glenn and Tim and Frank, let's take a look at it. So maybe it should be 4, maybe at minimum 4. So what would that do for me as Chief of Staff of the Army? That'd give me 4 brigades that I can answer the call of a combatant commander, answer the call of a nation, that I am 100% confident that they are capable of closing with and destroying the enemy with very little post-MOB train-up time. So I think that'd be great. So we'll see. More to follow on that. So I want you to have a spirit of innovation and inquiry, and I don't want you to just accept the status quo ante. I want you to get after it, take a look at it, figure out ways to improve, whether it's technology, equipment, training methods, systems, you name it. It's all comers. New Chief of Staff, 3 weeks on the job. I am willing to listen to anything about a new idea to make us a better Army, and I hope you will do that. And I want to also challenge all of you to really buckle down, and I'm saying the same thing to the active component, about readiness. About look in the mirror and look at ourselves and ask ourselves, how ready are we really? So the USR might say something, and there might be a chart that says green or amber or red or whatever. But dig a little deeper than that. Ground combat is unforgiving. ISIS does not care what patch is on your shoulder. They are not particularly impressed because we happen to carry the American flag. And we can never rest on our laurels. We can't look back and say, well, we hit the beach at Normandy, or we won this fight or that fight in World War I or World War II or Korea, Vietnam, or wherever, and think that's valid for today. It may be, it may not be. So I want each of you, I challenge each of you, to look at whatever formation you're in charge of and really dig deep into the readiness of that organization. And remember that when a soldier is killed, it's not a statistic that shows up on a slide. When a soldier is killed, it's not a storyboard. When a soldier is killed, it's one of our family. And to his actual family or her actual family, it's the end of the world. And we as leaders must always recommit ourselves to make sure that we are putting them in harm's way, well-led, well-equipped, and well-trained. And our soldiers will do whatever we tell them and lead them to do. They will go. Even if they have wooden rifles and they're throwing stones, they will go. But it is our job, it's our solemn and sacred responsibility to make sure when they go ready. So I challenge you all to keep readiness foremost in your mind. Keep it as your #1 priority. Understand there's no second place in combat. Understand that ground combat is unforgiving. Understand that the only thing worse and more expensive than fighting and winning a war is fighting and losing one. And readiness is the key to victory. Readiness is the key to winning in ground combat. Thanks for all you do. Army strong.
Hey, sir, that's my gavel, but I'm glad you're using it better than I do. So I'm going to tell you, you made the hair on the back of my neck stand up because I trust you, and I believe you aren't telling us just what we want to hear, but you told us what we wanted to hear. So General Milley, if you want to take your seats, has agreed to take a few questions. I think the mics are live in the aisles, if anyone wants to take this opportunity.
All right, where's Corey Carr? Let's go, Corey. Stand up and be counted there, big fella from Indiana. What's your question, Corey Carr? I can't believe he walked out of this room and didn't listen to that speech. Yeah, you ever watch The Green Mile? Corey is now walking the Green Mile.
Hey, sir, I'm right here.
What did he say?
Hey, sir, first off,
Oh, you are there. You're alive. Very good. Go ahead, Corey.
Sir, first off, thank you for being here. It means a lot, I think, to the total force to be here as part with your National Guard. And we are your National Guard. So my question on readiness, you already addressed the CTC rotation question, which was one of the things I was going to ask. But I would say on 12304 Bravo, what would you think the right amount would be for us to have a reasonable, for you to have reasonable flexibility as a strategic hedge to use the National Guard and maintain some of your active component for contingencies that come about? Is it, right now I think we're funded for about 1,000. Is it 2,000 or 3,000 that you think we need for 12304 Bravo, sir?
Corey, I don't know. Thank you for that question, putting me on the spot. I appreciate that. I know that you enjoyed being a lieutenant colonel, and you may see that again. I don't know the number, Corey. It's not insignificant. One of the briefings I had in the Pentagon, and I don't know how it translates into dollars, but it was, what was quoted to me was an 86% increase, so I don't know what that means. So I'd be careful about that number. I need someone to come back, run the numbers from the Army staff. Maybe Tim, you know the answer to the question, I don't know, but the number of dollars increase for the 12304, Corey, I don't know, I'll have to get you an answer. I know we're plugging and playing it for the budget, but I do know this, I think I need to increase it. Exact numbers, I don't know. The Army staff's crunching that, I suppose, and if they're not, they will be in a few minutes as my XO's whipping it back to them. But, I mean, look at the reality is this, the nation has fiscal challenges, as we all know, and the United States Army, along with other branches of the military, is going to continue to have budgetary challenges, and we're going to get smaller across the board. And because of that, I've got to maximize, as the Chief of Staff of the Army, I've got to maximize every ounce of capability out of all the piece parts of the Army. And I believe, because of what I've seen over the last 10, 15 years, I believe that I can get a lot more out of the Guard. And I know that there are operations around the world today that are ongoing, and there's contingencies that are always a potential. And I believe that I can get the Guard into those missions. Now, there's issues with that. Okay, so there's issues of access, presidential mobilization, there's all kinds of things like that, and then there's also the money involved in order to pay the troopers for going overseas. I've got to work through all that. I don't have an exact number off the top of my head, but I do know I want to go in that direction because, I mean, your soldiers in the Guard didn't just join the Guard just to hang out, right? So they want to go do things. That's number one. Number two, though, is the nation needs them because we can't keep spinning regular Army active component units because they're getting spun too quick and too fast. And if we are serious, if I am serious in my words about the Guard not only being a strategic reserve, which that's true, capacity, but to be operational, an operational Guard. If those words mean anything, well, you got to kind of walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And I got to make sure that I do that. So I have got to employ the Guard operationally, and I should. There's no reason why I shouldn't. The capability's there, the will is there, the desire's there, the training's there, the skill sets are there. So why not use them? And in cases, for example, like what's going on in Europe, the Guard's been hugely effective in helping out guys like Ben Hodges and General Breedlove, and General Hodges over there. So I want to increase, not decrease, the operational use of the Guard. And exactly how that translates in dollars, Corey, I don't know yet, but I should know, I hope, relatively shortly. Tim, do you have any clue on numbers of dollars? Or?
Sir, it just depends on what missions we want to do.
I want to do everything. I want to do it now.
So 1,200 would be
I want to do it yesterday.
Sir,
Did you ever see the Monty Python show? Yeah, you saw that? Yeah, that's what I tell him every morning.
sir, we've always talked.
I want it now, I want it yesterday.
We always talked
What's wrong with
about
you, General?
10,000 man days.
You want to be a lieutenant colonel again,
Man
too?
days. No, no, sir, I don't. I did like that rank, though, sir.
All right. Corey, I'll get you an answer. I promise, I swear. Another question. Give me a softball question, one that doesn't involve math. Shy. This is the first time. Let me find a tag. Tags are never shy. Tag? Is there a tag in the room? Yes, sir.
Aloha, sir. General Logan from Hawaii. I'm going to see you next week when you stop by. My question is, I had a meeting with General Brooks, great American, talking about aligning the BCTs into combatant commands. Can you add to that?
I think I heard you say aligning BCTs. So, yeah, let me address it just for a second. You know, combatant commands are joint, and I had the distinct honor of serving on the joint staff. I think Carter Ham's here, and I served under his leadership in J33. And the word alignment is actually not in the joint world. So you get allocated, you get apportioned, and you get assigned. We, the Army, have come up with the term regionally aligned forces. So we've aligned BCTs to the regions, the regional combatant commanders. Unfortunately, because we chose that word, it's really not truly, no kidding, recognized in the demand system of the joint world. And I know that's probably way too much information that you really don't care about, but it does matter as to how it lines up with combatant commanders, and it matters how that translates into money and so on and so forth. So the bottom line is, we do have regionally aligned, as the Army calls it, aligned. And what I've asked our guys to do is use the term allocated when we're talking to the Joint or Secretary of Defense world. What I want to do, though, is I also want to expand to that, because I think it makes sense. I think it's a good program, and I think it helps the combatant commanders. And I have mentioned that I want to try to expand it. So I've got some guys looking at that, expand that into the Guard. I see no reason why not. There's unique capabilities that are resident in the Guard. Also, as well as in the active component. So I think it's a good program. We have to expand it. Alignment, though, is probably the wrong word. I know it sounds kind of doctrine geekish, but it's the wrong word. And what I want to do is get BCTs allocated to combatant commanders, and I think that's a useful program, and it works to their advantage on building partner capacity and engagement, phase 0 type operations, and it also does great work for assuring allies that the United States will be there in time of crisis, and it in no small way deters opponents. So there's, to me, in my mind, there's nothing but goodness that comes out of that. I don't know if that answered your question. Did that answer?
Yes, it does. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Another one on the right. I can't see which right, my right or your right?
Sir, Don Dunbar from Wisconsin. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your comments. Thanks for your leadership.
Are you in the Air Force?
Yes, sir, I am.
Couldn't get in the Army? I'm sorry. Oh,
Sir,
I can't believe I said that.
Sir, I scored too high on the
I
IQ
can't
test.
believe
I'm
I said
sorry.
that. You know, since 1947, I've always thought of the Air Force as a good alternative to military service. So
Yes, sir.
I can't believe I said that in my inside voice. I'm sorry.
Sir, when they asked me which hand the rock
Actually,
was in, I couldn't
in
guess
all
it.
truth, all kidding aside, this is not a paid political announcement by General Welsh, but I love my Air Force because the United States Army has not come under direct enemy air attack since the Normandy beachhead. Think about that for a minute. That's unbelievable. And I want my Air Force to be able to sweep the skies in 24 to 48 hours of any Air Force on the face of the earth, and I don't even want to have a second thought about it. I know they can do it. And for those of you who have been in direct ground combat and have been in a firefight or two, and I've been in more than my share, there's nothing quite so sweet as the sound of a fixed-wing United States Air Force aircraft screaming overhead. So that's what I actually think about my Air Force. I actually love you.
Well, sir, your Air Force loves you, too.
I know you do.
And I love the
Yes.
soldiers in the Wisconsin National Guard. And you made a great point, I thought, about what's the right number and challenging those assumptions. So as you look down the road, you use the 39 or 60 or 100. I think that's spot on. My thought, and I would ask it in the form of a question, is as we look at the readiness of the National Guard, we talk about operational, we talk about strategic. It seems to me, as a dumb blue guy, that the best thing we can do is keep the Guard rotating in something like an R4GN or an R4GN-like system,
Right.
so that you and the elected leaders of this country can count on a set number of the National Guard at any given time. But not only that, we can make sure that the great Army developmental force, a training force, can make sure that we have the throughput, so when something happens, we can deliver on the capability for the country. So I'd ask you to maybe take a look 3 to 5 years down the road and what you might see in this rotational opportunity for the National Guard.
Well, I know that Tim and the Guard Bureau and Frank Grass and team have done some work, and I think many of you may have participated in it, on looking at the rotational schedules. Right now, it's kind of 1:5, 1 to 5 bog dwell sort of thing for RC units. That may or may not be the right answer. The preliminary results I've seen so far, indicates that we could probably tighten that up a little bit. I've heard 1 to 3, I've heard 1 to 4. I don't know the exact calculations yet, but the rotational cycle for the Guard, I think you're spot on. I think the rotational cycle of the Guard is under review and should be under review. And I, frankly, as I see the world unfolding, I see that rotational cycle increasing. But it's got to be predictable. And I'm sensitive to the fact that Guardsmen have, day jobs, so to speak, and they have civilian employment. And it's inappropriate for us to just, unless it's a huge national emergency, to just say, hey, cease work, cease fire, and throw your uniform on and let's go. There's got to be an element of predictability to it, so I'm sensitive to that. And I want to do it right. There's a right way and a wrong way to do this stuff, and I don't want people getting jerked around and hosed in the process. I want to make sure we do it right. That applies to active component, that applies to National Guard, it applies to USAR. No matter who you are, I want to make sure that we're treating those soldiers and their families correctly, and we are not taking them to the well too many times. We're not burning them out, and that we can do a sustained rate of fire of units over time to meet the national security needs of the nation. And I want to treat people right in the process. So, but we are taking a look at that rotation schedule down the road. I don't think we're going to change it here in the next month or two, but I know Tim and the team are coming back to me with a look at that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Aim high. Aim high and shoot low.
Hey, sir. Hey, sir.
Deb
Red
said
Brown.
one more question.
Red Brown back here
Red.
in the back.
God bless Texas, brother.
Hooah, sir. Hey, sir, based on your previous position as a force provider and your current job, what do you feel about the ratios of heavy versus light, given the merging threat in Europe?
That's a great question. You have inside baseball knowledge of what we're looking at, so it's kind of a planted question. There's many who think, I shouldn't say many, there are some who are suggesting that perhaps we have lightened our force too much, lightened the Army too much over time. And others who have suggested that we've basically become a motorized or wheeled vehicle type Army, and that we've actually lost our light capabilities. And there's fair arguments on all sides of that. So I've asked for a study to come back to me, and I think maybe the commission actually might be doing some of this as well, the Future of the Force, Future of the Army Commission, as to what is exactly the right balance. Because we as a nation, we're a global power, and we have global, worldwide national security interests. And we don't have the luxury of fighting against a singular opponent in a singular piece of terrain or a singular area of responsibility. We could end up fighting lots of different types of opponents in lots of varied types of terrain. So what we owe the President of the United States is a variety of options so that he has a lot of arrows in his quiver, so that when a crisis shows up, he can look there, and the military, we can present him with a wide variety of options. So we don't ever want to have an imbalanced force, an imbalanced joint force or an imbalanced Army. We want to make sure that we have a proper mix and a proper balance of all types of capabilities because the future is very, very unpredictable. We cannot know what tomorrow brings, let alone next year or 10 years from now. We can have studies and we can do a lot of estimates of the situation, but we can't possibly know with certainty. I don't know, with respect to Europe, for example. I just got back from there. It's obviously an increasingly tense situation that lots of countries are increasingly nervous and looking at that situation. But it could be there, it could be Korea, it could be further in the Middle East, it could be a lot of places. I don't know, and neither does anyone else. So no matter who you listen to or who you read, we could end up being committed anywhere. So if you look back 100 years ago, or 101, I guess, summer of 1914 as just a quick example, and if you were a person living in Paris or London or Berlin, and it was, say, June 1st, 1914, well, you'd be sitting there, you'd be eating your cheese and drinking your espresso and hanging out and watching people walk around the parks and so on and so forth. And then you'd find yourself about 3 weeks later in June that an archduke got shot down in Sarajevo by a terrorist, the Black Hand, a very small, relatively unknown group. And you sit there and you open up your morning paper and you read it and you say, oh, Archduke shot, Sarajevo. And you say, well, Groundhog Day. He was one of 70 senior officials who were shot and killed that year throughout Europe by terrorists. So, Groundhog Day. But then all of a sudden, the head of Austria, whose son it was that was shot and killed, said, well, those Serbians, they got to be punished. And he kicked into gear and mobilized his Austrian army. He didn't even like his son, in fact, but he did it anyway. So he mobilized his Austrian army. And then the Russians said, well, I can't have Austria beat up on my little Slavic brothers the Serbs, and they mobilized their army. And then the Germans said, well, I can't have the Russians beat up on my German brother, the Austrians, so I mobilized my army. And the French said, well, I can't have everybody else mobilized unless I mobilize. And then the British said, what the hell's going on? And boom. And they launched on a war within 30 days that was an absolute bloodfest. And they all thought, oh, by the way, that the war would be just a dust-up and last about 6 weeks and it'd be over and the von Schlieffen plan to win the day and so on. And how wrong they were. They had no earthly idea of the chain of events that they were set out to do or what was about to happen. And they lost almost a half of European male youth in that war. And that war then set off 30 consecutive years of warfare. And they were bookended by World Wars I and World War II. But in between those two wars, it wasn't exactly, peace and nirvana. 100 million people died between those two wars. So if you're sitting there in June 1914, you think everything's rosy and copacetic and so on and so forth, you have no idea what you're looking at 30 years from now. And I would say that if we think today, in 2015, if we think for a minute that we can figure out exactly what's going to happen next year, the year after, or 10 years from now, I think that's the ultimate act of arrogance and hubris, and we should be very cautious about that. So I don't know what the future holds in Europe or anywhere else, and I don't know the exact balance or mix of heavy and light forces. I do know that we have to have a balance, and I do know that we have to be able to respond to contingencies in varied parts of the world. And I do know that I intend to study that one hard because I have an uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. I can't pin down the exact number, but I'm not so sure that we have it right. Not for today, but really for tomorrow and for, a few years from now. I'm not so sure we have it exactly right. So I am taking a look at that. I am not predisposed either way, but I am going to take a hard look at the rebalancing of or the balance that we have, not the rebalancing, the balance of the heavy light forces and the other mix, strikers, etc., to make sure that we have it about right as we go into the future and we can present the President with whatever options are needed at the time. Okay, let me take one more question. Yes, sir.
Hello. Sir, Jeff Holmes, Tennessee.
Tennessee, great state of
Okay.
Tennessee.
Yeah, my question doesn't involve any math or anything.
That's
it's
good.
Actually, two-part question.
Well, that's because you're from Tennessee.
Yeah. I can write this down though and read it. So, all right, sir. In regard to the Guard being the combat reserve for the active component.
Right.
Okay. First part of this question: would you agree that in order to do that, we have to mirror the capabilities of the active component? Maybe not in
Yeah, no, I
quantity.
got it.
So unit types, so forth.
Sure.
And if you would agree with that, sir,
Yep.
then how could ARI be a adequate initiative for the restructuring of aviation?
That ends the conference.
I couldn't let it go without asking.
I'm volunteering you out of here, son.
I did enjoy my time as a lieutenant colonel. If you'll give me that
That's
same
good.
command again.
I got Lieutenant Colonel Barr right here for you. How's that oak leaf for you? You always wanted to be a member of Massachusetts, didn't you? All right, so hey, look it. I got it. I know the deal. So I know the ARI thing is massive amounts of motion, so on and so forth, and the whole concept of mirror imaging. I sign up to the idea in general, and I say in general, that reserves should more or less, the active component and the reserve component, both the Guard and USAR, should more or less be structured about the same. But I would be lying to you, and you would be lying to yourselves, and we would be lying to each other if we said we were mirror images. We are not. Nor is the active component mirror images of itself. The 82nd doesn't look like the 101st, which doesn't look like the 10th, which doesn't look like the 25th, which doesn't look like the 1st Armored, and doesn't look like the 1st Cav. I mean, every one of our organizations is actually uniquely structured, pretty much. They're not all structured precisely the same in any of the components. So I don't want, it's a good bumper sticker, and I got it, and I understand it, and it sounds good, and it briefs well, but it's actually not true. It's not true in the active component, it's not true in the Guard, it's not true in the reserve. It's not true that all these units look exactly precisely the same. So I don't want to give you a false perception that I agree that everyone should look precisely the same, because I don't, because it's not a reflection of reality. Having said that, though, I do believe that the National Guard is, in fact, the combat reserve. I mean, you are. Look at the active component of the United States Army, if a war were to happen, one of the contingency plans, it would basically consume the active component very, very quickly, very quickly. And I was taught a long time ago in the advanced course that, if you're a company commander and you've got a defense, you have a reserve. If you're a battalion commander and you've got defense or an offense, doesn't matter what type of op, you always designate your reserve, right? So the United States Army National Guard is, in fact, not theory, not bumper stickers, is, in fact, America's combat ground reserve. And I have a personal responsibility as the Chief of Staff of the entire Army to make sure that that combat reserve is trained, it's manned, and yes, equipped to be able to do that function. And that includes not only ground maneuver in terms of infantry and armor, but that includes aviation. So I have to take a hard look at it. I am not going to stand here and say, oh yeah, I'm going to reverse this, because that's a decision that was made prior to my time as chief. It was already a decision by the Secretary of the Army. It's been validated, every which way by Sunday. I am going to do what I said I would do in testimony with respect to ARI, is I'm going to wait to see the results of the National Commission, which was constituted by Congress that you're very familiar with. I know they're studying the problem very seriously. They're studying it very deeply. And I believe, and I know some of these guys, that they are very, very highly talented professionals. And I believe they will come back to me with some solid recommendations, and it's from those recommendations from which I'll move. So right now I have a known point, and I'll shift from a known point when I get those recommendations back. So I'm not shutting anything off, but I'm also not going to make false promises in front of a crowd that I know will be really popular if I said it. So I'm not going to do that either. So I'm not going to raise false expectations. I can tell you what my first principles are. My first principles are the United States National Guard is the combat reserve of the United States of America, period, for ground combat operations. And I have a moral, legal, and ethical responsibility to ensure that the United States Army National Guard is manned, trained, and equipped. And I will fulfill my statutory responsibility. Okay, so how's that there, Brother Tennessee? Is that all right? And I didn't even use any numbers. I could have, though. All right, so, hey, look I'll let you go. I know Frank Grass is coming up here. He's going to do a town hall meeting. I am going to head out to the Pacific here in just a couple of hours for a great 26-hour flight. That'll be awesome. And, but I want to thank you all again for what you do. I want to thank you for what you've done in the past, what you are going to do in the future, and what you're doing now. I've always been proud to serve alongside, shoulder to shoulder with great guardsmen throughout my service, and I look forward to continuing to do that in the future. So Army strong.
Sir? Sir, thank you so much for your comments and truly for telling us what to hear without just telling us what we want to hear. If you would, please accept this little memento, just something for your aide to have to carry on the plane and take care of too. But it's a little guitar that has our theme of this conference, which is the National Guard, ready for America's call, sir, and that's really ready for your call also. So please accept that as a small memento, and thanks again for your time and making time for us.
Thanks.
Really memorable. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is this under $20?
Don't ask that question, sir. Will the Sergeant at Arms please escort our distinguished guest and his party from the platform?